Hallo, herzlich willkommen, guten Morgen. Welcome to the session. I think it's announced in English, so we have to do it in English, which is fine. So welcome to this session about the coding Spring Boot apps in Visual Studio Code.
Hi, I'm Sandra Ahlgrimm. I'm in the Java team of the developer relations in Microsoft advocacy. Okay, that was a bit weird. So I'm very happy working for Java developers inside Microsoft. Our goal is that we have an eye that Microsoft stays connected with the community. So we're always here to give back. And I'm very happy that I can also announce that I will be responsible for our Microsoft MVP, so Most Valuable Professional program, starting in July. I mean, it's already started, but I will be program lead for Java. So if you are a Java dev and do anything with Azure, Microsoft occasionally on stage or in blog posts, you can reach out to me and we can discuss how one can become one of those MVPs, which is, I feel, also nice to be like rewarded for all the efforts you're maybe already doing. And I'm also very happy to be here on stage with Martin Lippert.
Yeah, hi, I'm Martin. I work for the Spring team, the Spring Core Engineering team, so the team that does all the Spring Framework and Spring Boot stuff. And I'm working on the IDE extensions. So my goal is to make you more productive in the IDE of your choice. And with that, I think we can get started because we have this live coding session. We will probably not spend a lot of time on slides because I think slides are boring when talking about tools. So we will do live stuff in the IDE.
Yep, so let's start. We have VS Code. Here it is. Here's already an app open. But if you have it installed and you don't have anything yet, you might see a nice welcome screen. And what you need as a Java dev is, first of all, you go on extensions. The other way around would be to just open a Java project, and then you might have seen it in the corner right where it says like, hey, I see you're using Java. You probably want to install those extensions. I would always check for the extensions whom they are coming from. Like, can you trust those people? Because the VS Code extensions, they're open. Anyone can put an extension there. We have seen it in the past that there were some malicious software. But if you see like 1,000 or even millions and billions downloads, you can trust it. So like here you have the for Microsoft. So and what we need for our demo would be the Java extension package. Cool. So here's the extension pack for Java. You can see it's from Microsoft, so you can probably trust. And then it comes with the language support for Java by Red Hat, the debugger for Java, test runner for Java, which just turned GA. So we have version 1.0 at least in the insights build. We have Maven for Java, project manager for Java, and IntelliCode, which is a bit like, knowing a bit more what you want to do. And we also have like more language servers now. So like Oracle released theirs. Is anyone using that one? Yeah, here one person in the front. Maybe biased because of working for Oracle. So also like Microsoft doesn't, so they don't provide the language servers that's like coming from Red Hat or now also for Oracle, or let's see who comes next. And what you will also need as a Spring developer is some Spring extensions. They're also bundled in the Spring Boot extension pack, coming from VMware. I think it just got changed from Pivotal to VMware, I think.
And now it's Broadcom.
We might need an update again soon. It comes with the Spring Boot tools, the Spring Initializer Java support, and the Spring Boot dashboard. So why don't we start the programming exercise, Martin?
Yeah. Let's do some stuff. So if you want to get started in VS Code using Spring Boot, of course, usually you would do something like this, right? Usually you would go to, if you listen to talks by Josh Long, you know the second best place on the internet. You go to start.spring.io, you create your project, select all the kind of versions and select the dependencies, and then you download the stuff and open it up. But of course, in VS Code, there's an easier way to do that. You can just go to the command palette and say, let's say Spring. And you see, I can create, using Spring Initializer, the project behind start.spring.io, just create a new Spring Boot project based on Maven. And then it asks you for all these kind of parameters that you can use, like which boot version, is it Java or Kotlin, what's the group ID and the artifact ID, is it Java war, which Java version, let's say 17, and then you can basically search for all these starter modules and select them directly. So let's do something like this and this, and say, okay, I create this, and then you can just download the project, put it on the disk, and it's going to be right opened within VS Code. Let me not really do this to create this and put this in. Instead, I would really like to jump into an existing project right away. Of course, using my favorite one, Pet Clinic. What else?
But just to wrap up the previous one, I'm very happy that I can stay inside my IDE, and I know from Spring Tooling we have that also in IntelliJ and Eclipse.
Yeah.
But so I don't have to open a browser.
Yeah. Usually all the IDEs have this direct integration, which makes it very convenient. You can just stay within the IDE, open this up, and that's basically it. You get started with your Spring Boot project in 10 seconds, basically, as you have seen. But this is not the only thing that the tooling does for you in VS Code. VS Code with the Java tooling and the Spring tooling is quite sophisticated nowadays. So I think it's really on par with all the existing Java IDEs out there, like Eclipse or IntelliJ. It gives you all the nice features, content assist, refactorings, quick fixes, all those things. And with the Spring tooling, we add additional stuff on top of that. So, for example, what we do here is if you open up a Spring project, you get this nice kind of coding features on top of the existing Java tooling. So if you do Java tooling here, for example, of course, you would see all these kind of content-assisty things, but I'm in a controller here, so we do things like you want to kind of create a new request mapping, type add. You see, probably you want to do a get mapping. That's it, right? Quick snippet. You can type this in, jump from place to place, and so on. So you can super easily add new things. This is kind of content assist specific for Spring. We even do kind of more, let's say, sophisticated stuff. So if I would add, for example, a value annotation over here, because I would like to inject a property, it gives you content assist for all the properties around. So if I would like to inject the kind of the server port, I could just do that, and that's it, right? So it gives you direct content assist because it knows about this is a Spring project, this is a Spring annotation. What do you probably want to do at this place in this source code? So it can give you all these nice content assist features, and I think in a really fast way. So we worked a lot on performance stuff, so it's really, really, really fast. In addition to that, to all these kind of additional content assist things, of course, you can do the same in the application.properties file. So you can go in your application.properties file and add some stuff, some configuration. And usually, at least when I do that, I cannot remember all the properties around in Spring Boot. I don't know, millions or so. So instead of searching the documentation, I can just type some stuff in here like, probably let me search for the server port. Tells me, okay, these are the properties, content assist shows up. I can do that, even get kind of hover support telling me exactly what this is all about. Should be an integer, so default is 8080. What is the, that's the server port for the embedded Tomcat. And if I do something like this, it also gives me validation for that. So it tells me, this is not an integer. This is not a valid port. So you can easily see this while typing. Something you would basically expect from a good IDE to give you direct feedback. Instead of just running the Spring Boot application and see that it fails at startup, you can see this stuff right away from within your IDE.
That's so cool. So it helps me also with, usually I had a question, I go to someone senior and they're like, or more senior than myself, and they're like, have you read the documentation? And I'm like, VS Code has it now kind of integrated here thanks to the Spring tooling integration.
And we do we go one step further. We try to give you more validations and more hints from a Spring team perspective. So if you do, for example, stuff like, let's say you have some random stuff here. And so you do this ugly thing like field injection, auto wiring depend. Who's still doing field injection? Hands up. No. Yeah.
They're just not brave. I just did a month ago.
No worries about that. But as we recommend to use constructor injection, you can have a validation in place that tells you about you should maybe convert this this field injection into constructor parameter, and you can just do that, right? So there's a quick fix for this validation saying please convert that, and it turns the stuff into an additional parameter for my existing constructor, for example. So very convenient. So let me turn that around, otherwise it's not going to start up. And similar things, right? So I don't know, let's say we have an auto-wide constructors. You might know you don't need to put the auto-wide annotation on the constructor. So it also validates that for you, gives you the hint it's not necessary, and you can just say remove it for me. That's it. Right? So really, 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 I think really convenient for those kind of things. And this kind of gives you additional features while you're coding from a Spring perspective. I know that this is sometimes quite opinionated. So I don't like the auto-wide annotation on constructors. Maybe you have a different opinion and you like that. You want to keep that. And you would be pretty annoyed by the IDE saying, yeah, you should not do this. This is a warning, or this is an error, whatever. So you can, of course, configure the level that this is going to be reported in the preferences. Right? You can just go to the preferences. If you go to VS Code, go to the preferences, to the settings, and you go to the extensions and go to the Spring Boot tools. You will see a lot of preferences for all these kind of validations around property files, AOT optimizations, best practices, and so on. And you can, of course, just select, should it be ignored, should it be an info, warning, and whatever. So you can really specify that to your needs so that you get exactly those warnings and errors reported that you like, that you need, that you want, and not the other ones around. So you can really customize that to your needs. We will come to that later again for these kind of, for the preferences when we talk about versions, but that's for a later point in time.
Yeah, I just want to add here, but that's not what you want to do, right? So in order to write clean code, and especially if I choose a framework like Spring, I already have chosen the opinionated art of code. I trust the Spring framework team to come up with like, that's the default, maybe best way, potentially best way to do it. So yeah, I would also trust here, and we work together with the Spring framework, Spring extension team, or with you from Spring Tooling, so we always ensure that we have like the best practices that also the Spring team itself is recommending.
Another thing, for example, if I have a request mapping, in some version of Spring Boot there was kind of get mapping and post mapping, some more specific annotations being introduced. So you can do something like that as well. You can replace it, right? It tells you, oh, you should not really do this. Please replace it with the other one around. And there are some refactorings that we do, or some kind of validations and quick fixes that you can even apply across the whole project. You can say, okay, please apply this to the whole file. Please replace everything with get mapping and things like that, and fix that across my whole file, not just at this specific location in my source code. So I think is pretty nice. Okay, so this gives you a lot of additional coding assistance. In addition to that, you also, I think, would like to get an idea about what is inside of my project. Because if you work on a Spring project, you usually not necessarily think about classes and interfaces and all those language level concepts all the time. You probably also think about things like, oh, this is a repository, this is a controller, this is a service, and these kind of the stereotypes that Spring gives you, or that you have defined yourself, maybe on top of that. And you have the annotations in place, But the IDE usually just gives you kind of the files or the types and things like that. So you still need to keep this in mind and sometimes think about, oh yeah, there's a naming convention and things like that in place. But we would like to go one step further, right? We would like to give you this direct access to your source code from this perspective. So for that, the tooling extracts this information from the source code and gives you that right away in your hand. So if you go, there's a feature in VS Code called go to symbol in workspace or search for symbol in workspace, which is usually used for symbols like classes and types and method names and things. So you can easily jump to method name, to a type and things like that. And we enhance that so that it gives you direct access to Spring concepts. For example, and this is all kind of with the add symbol for the annotations. So for example, if you say add /, it shows you all the request mappings, all the paths that you mapped in your application using controllers. Basically, you can exactly see what are all the request mappings that I have defined in my project just with one keystroke, right? You just say, okay, add /, and it tells you, okay, where is my owners, for the owner, where's the added get thing defined? You can jump to that. Where's the welcome thing defined? Jump to that, right? So super easy overview about what are all the request mappings I have in my project. And this is not the only thing. We can also do something like add plus. What are all the beans that are defined in my project from the Spring perspective, right? Where are all the beans that I defined? So I might have an idea about, oh, I have a crash controller or something like that. Where is that defined? You can see there's a bean defined in this place in my source code, which I think is really, really convenient. And in addition to that, you can also search for or directly see all the annotations. So for example, if I would like to say, where is a Spring configuration being used and being defined, I can see that, okay, there's a cache configuration. That sounds good. There's a customizer. And there's a pet clinic application showing up as an add configuration bean. And this is interesting, because if I go to that place in the source code, there's no add configuration annotation put in place in my source code. There's just an add Spring Boot application. But the tooling analyzes that annotation and knows about Spring Boot annotation is a Spring Boot configuration, is a configuration annotation. So it gives you this in the list of add configuration annotations as well, because it knows that this is a configuration class, which I think is really, really nice. Gets you an easy overview for where are all my configuration classes, even though you might use a sub-interface or more specific annotation for that, not interface. So that makes it really, really, I think, really convenient, really easy to quickly navigate in your source code and see where it all comes from. And those are kind of of course, I can also use for other annotations or other things, like where's a kind of a path variable being used and things like that. So all these Springy annotations are being extracted into those symbols and they're being given to you. They also show up in the outline view. So if you take a look at the outline of the class, there's the usual Java outline that you're familiar with. And in addition to that, there's a Spring Boot tools outline information that also gives you this additional information. So if I, for example, go to the controller thing, you see in the outline, you also get the annotations as well as all the request mappings, for example, that are defined over here to easily navigate and find all those Springy concepts in your projects, which I think is pretty cool. So with that, I think it's great. So we looked a lot at source code and worked a lot with source code. So what about actually not working with source code anymore, but just testing some stuff and running some stuff and doing things like that?
Okay, so when I run it, maybe also some basics for Java on VS Code. So some people said they always got lost to how to configure their Java in VS Code. We made that very easy, so you can just click here. And then you can see you use open Java settings, open logs, clean workspace cache, what you might also need, or open project settings, where we can see here, here's my path, and I can also select my JDK runtime and also see all the libraries we have. Okay, interesting. You also have a warning here. Okay, so that's how you can find it. And even if you have like multiple projects in one folder open, I have that occasionally, that I have like multiple projects open, because with VS Code I can do that. It won't crash that easy. It actually never crashes, for me at least. But anyhow, so, and then I even have like, I see my projects and then with all the JDK versions attached, and I can also switch very easily between those. And if I want to select something I don't have on my machine, I can also download it and it will find it. So that's also very convenient, especially when I start. So now we want to start the app. And what I want to show also is the Spring Boot dashboard.
Yeah,
right?
sounds great.
So you said like with some tricks, so like with Command Shift P, right? You opened that one, or was it Command P, right? You opened your line and then you had to remember what to type in to see like the beans and classes. You have the same thing if you just go and find the Spring Boot dashboard. If you don't see your extension on the left, they might be in after the dots. So just be aware you have them here, and then you can also see all the beans your app is using. And what I find also very handy is all the endpoint mappings. From here I can also start the app. In the terminal I will see the output. Looks good. So let's check out the web page. And as I said, I don't like to open another browser, so I can also stay inside VS Code and open it from here. So here's my simple browser. And there we go. So, and here I have the normal Pet Clinic app. And when I want to test it, I can also go here and then check out the code for the endpoints, or I click on that one and then will actually execute the endpoint, and here is my oops get, or which gives me then the expected error. I just go for something else, which is also very handy, and I use it all the time.
As you can see in the dashboard, there were the beans being shown before Sandra started the application.
Yep.
And the request mappings, and that is information coming from the source code.
Yes.
So it's all kind of inferred from analyzing the source code. When you start the app, it turned kind of the color into green, and that shows you the beans and request mappings that are actually active in the running application.
So now here's the browser I get missing because I stopped the app. So I would have to run it again or start it in debug mode. And that will work as well. So, as you said, you wanted to test?
Yeah, but before that, I
Sure.
would also kind of, if you start the app again,
Yep.
and you see this kind of, it turns into green, so it shows you the stuff real from the running application. You also see these green highlights in the source code showing up, for example, at get mapping annotation, or at the class name, or something like that, right? You see these green highlights, and these green highlights show you which components from your source code are actually active in your running application. So usually if you start up or if you work on a Spring Boot project, there's this gap between you work on your source code, you have an idea about why you are doing things and what should happen at runtime when you start things up, and then you start it up and something happens at runtime. And sometimes it is exactly what you expected, sometimes it's not, whatever. But there's still this gap between what exactly is active at runtime and what is in your source code. And usually you kind of bridge this gap in your mind and think, oh, I know this is kind of an add component, but it is conditional. That's why it's not active, because the property is not around or whatever, right? So you try to map this in your mind. And the tooling tries to do that for you. So we get all this information from the running Spring Boot application, and we map this information from the running app onto your source code, so that you can directly see in the source code this mapping is active. It does really exist in your source code. If you hover over this green highlight, you see this additional information usually showing up at the top of that, saying somewhere, maybe if you scroll up in that little box here,
Yep.
you see this request mapping is active, and it's coming from this process. And if you go to the class definition, so go in the source code, if you go up to kind of where public class or whatever is defined, you also see that the class is being highlighted, and that means this class, this bean, is active. There is an active bean for this class in the running application, and you can even see with the little code lines above which other beans get injected into this class. So usually you have this kind of injection defined, constructor injection or whatever. You say, oh, this is a controller, there should be a repository being injected over here. So with this highlight, you see there is actually a repository being injected in here, and where is this repository come from? So you can take a look at, oh, this repository is being injected, and it comes from this place in your source code, this location. So you see exactly what is at runtime being injected into this bean, which is usually something that you need to imagine, or Spring Boot does for you automatically or magically sometimes. But we try to give you this information directly in the source code and map that onto the source code, so that you don't need to kind of make this connection in your mind. And this even works for kind of add conditional beans, for example. So you would see that this bean is not around, and you see, oh, the condition did not match because of, and you get a nice message from the running Spring Boot app saying, this condition did not match because it could not find the property whatever, for example, if you have conditional on property, for example. Which I think is a really, really powerful feature of the tooling, because it does not only help you working with the source code, it also helps you working with a running Spring Boot application and seeing what's going on inside of this running Spring Boot application. And if you go, oh, you're still on the dashboard, right? You see on the left side there's these beans, the request mappings, and then properties, for example. So you see even more information from the running app. What are the properties that actually end up being defined from the Spring Boot perspective in the running application, and where do those properties come from? Some come from the system environment, some come from other property source. There can be multiple ones or different ones or whatever, and they might kind of override or whatever. So you see this information in the properties view directly. Where do they come from, and what values end up in the application if you configure your app to actually deliver this information?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I can see right away also what properties like my Spring Java app is using. I didn't knew that it knows all of those things, but always good to know. And what I also like in the Spring Boot dashboard is I also can see here my memory usage. So especially if I aim for like smaller footprint or performance adjustments or whatever, I can make my code changes and then also see like the memory used already on my developer machine.
But it's not a profiling tool.
No.
So this is just a quick overview about how is the memory behaving in the different memory regions. And there's a drop down below the graph where you can say, oh, please show me the heap stuff or the non-heap memory of my JVM. But it's not meant as a replacement for your profiling tool, right? Just a kind of a quick overview about what's going on. And that's it, right? Just as a kind of a nice little spot in the lower left corner.
Yeah, as we said, like with VS Code, we always try to go for best performance. And if we would have baked that in like more like sophisticated, it would have taken a lot of performance from like the overall IDE. So as you said, it's just a quick overview and no aiming to replace anything else. So,
and all this live information that you've seen is coming from the running Spring Boot application in case you put the Spring Boot Actuators dependency on the project. That's important, right? You need to have the Actuators on the project, which is kind of a usual feature of Spring Boot to give you all kind of information and probes and whatever. And many people use that. So you can just put that on the project, and then you get all these information, because that's the source that the IDE uses to get this information out of the running Spring Boot application. There's nothing IDE specific that we inject into the running application, or there's no agent, or there's no modification being made to the running Spring Boot application. It just uses the Spring Boot Actuator component that you probably already put on your project, or you can just put on the project, which is IDE agnostic and has really nothing to do with the IDE itself. We just benefit from that and use that information.
Cool. Oh yeah, I also changed the order. So yeah, in VS Code you can also change everything, like the layout. You can drag and drop it everywhere. So if you want it somewhere else, usually, and also like the order. So if your VS Code looks different than mine, or you want to have like the windows switched, you can just do it. Okay, why don't we stop that one and run the tests and see how that looks like. So I can run them from here, I guess. One test with coverage. So here I can see my test results and also like the test coverage, which is pretty cool. So I can see, okay, cool, which tests were run. I can also rerun those. This one also triggers an exception. Okay, and I can also see like, here's the result, but those ones don't have it. Yeah, it has it, obviously. So it's also very easy and handy to just run the tests, also from the IDE.
We show you all the stuff in VS Code because that's kind of a slightly different flavor of IDE, right? So you might use. We can actually make a quick poll, right? Who is, for day-to-day Java development, who is using IntelliJ? Okay. Who is using Eclipse? Who is using VS Code already?
Yay.
Yeah. Who is using
NetBeans?
NetBeans? Okay.
There was one, I think. Okay, cool. So you might want to support it again.
So we show you a lot of stuff in VS Code. From the Spring tooling, we do the same stuff for Eclipse. And for IntelliJ, there's of course the ultimate edition with all this Spring tooling from JetBrains. So nothing we really need to do for that, because it's all done by JetBrains already. So you can basically do almost everything that we've seen here in JetBrains as well. I think sometimes there are little kind of differences here and there, but it's really more or less in the details. So just as a side note. You see that VS Code is really it has a different flavor. It's more editor-centric, more lightweight, more kind of focusing on keystrokes, and it's not so UI heavy like the other IDEs where you have widgets and wizards for everything basically. You basically don't have that in VS Code usually.
Yeah, I can also see like all the Maven dependencies I'm used to. So like my life cycle, I can also start it from here. I see my Maven profiles, if there are some set. Yeah, and also like from the Microsoft point of view, I mean, how do you say that right? So we also don't care which IDE the Java developers are using. So like the Java on VS Code is just an initiative to give back, because like what makes money for us is like the cloud, our AI services. So we also have our Azure tooling for IntelliJ, so we collaborate a lot with them, and we will do in future as well. But as it's also a paid service, especially if you want to use Spring as well on IntelliJ, you use the ultimate version. So like this one is just from the global perspective, also like a free service people can use.
Should we move over to kind of showing versions and validations around versions and things like that?
Oh yes.
Yeah? One of my favorite new features and topics. That's why I'm very eager to show that. So if you use Spring and Spring Boot, you might have noticed that there are new versions coming out quite frequently. New patch versions, CVE fixes almost every other week or whatever. new minor versions, and new major versions. So who is using Spring Boot 3.2 already?
That's nice.
3.1? 3.0? Okay, now for the brave ones, 2.7 or older. This session is for you.
Okay.
So what we do in the tooling is we try to help you with that, right? We try to help you with the situation of new Spring Boot versions coming out all the time. So what we do is, as a first step in the validations, we basically show you there's a new Spring Boot version. So make you aware of all this, right? First step, make you aware of you using Spring Boot version XYZ in your project. Hey, there's a new patch version coming along. There's a new patch version already out there. This patch version is XYZ. Kind of first step. Same for there's a new minor version. There's a new major version. So you can also see that, hey, there is also a newer major version, and the latest major version is in this case 3.5. This is kind of the first step, right? Make you aware of this stuff. Right? Give you direct feedback in the IDE. Whenever you work on your project, where are you with regards to the latest updates in the Spring Boot versions? And as I said before, sometimes you know, I know there's Spring Boot 3.2. Thank you for that. I cannot update now. Don't bother me with that information. I know it, but I'm still on 2.7 or whatever. So you can, of course, customize that in the preferences. Say, oh, I need to have new patch versions showing up as an error all the time, so they jump up to my eye. Or I would like to see new major versions not at all, or as an information or warning or whatever. So you can customize that to your needs. And in addition to that, it also tells you the support ranges. So the open source support ranges, for example, for Spring Boot 2.7, it's basically ended in November last year, so there are no new patch versions, no new CVE fixes coming up in the open source space for 2.7 and older, because the open source support range has ended for that. So we give you this information as well in the IDE if you want to, right? If you opt into that with the preferences, you can see this information as well.
Yeah, because we as Java devs and Spring developers, we want to update, right? We want to use the cool new features. It's usually like the engineering managers who are like, no, you can't do that. It's too risky. We don't have that time now. But then you can tell them, hey, look, we need to upgrade. And it also says you like Maven dependency version changes only. Looks good so far. Or I can also open the release notes to show it, like what we have here. And then since it's already deprecated, or I would need like the commercial support, and then I can click on that, and then he can see how much that will cost.
So that's kind of the second step, right? First step is make you aware of this stuff. Second step is what do you want to do next? Update, upgrade, whatever.
Yep.
So you have these kind of quick fixes that Sandra already opened. The quick fixes for, the patch version, probably just a minor little update. More interestingly, if you want to upgrade to a newer major version, for example, involving more changes, what do you do? Usually you go to the website, go to the release notes, there's a migration guide. For example, if you want to upgrade to Spring Boot 3.0, there's a migration guide telling you exactly what you need to do, right? Or update the Java version and update this and update that and change this and change that. Long list. Right? And some parts of that are quite annoying and tedious to do, like, I need to upgrade all the Jakarta things. So what we try to do in the tooling, make it easier for you. So the tooling can basically say, please upgrade this project for me, at least up to a certain level. So it does not guarantee that it does everything. Can you do the preview, please?
Yes, please.
So it does not guarantee that it does everything for you, but it tries to do the most tedious changes for you, right? It tries to really help you with the upgrade to the new minor version, to the new major version. So for example, let me quickly go up here and say the POM file, for example. If you take a look at that, you see that what are all the changes that this upgrade recipe would do for you. So it would change the POM version, of course, would upgrade Java to 17, would set the Java version, update some other dependencies. For example, fix the dependency to the MySQL connector because that has changed artifact IDs. So it updates that, inserts some Jakarta things, and so on and so on. Right? So it does a lot of stuff for you. It also, of course, what you would expect from it, if you go down here and say what is kind of, in this case, for example, it updates the JavaX dependencies to Jakarta dependencies, updates the import statements, and things like that. So it tries to help you doing the most tedious things. Again, it's not a silver bullet. It does not guarantee that it does everything for you, right? Because there's sometimes so many difficulties, so many changes. You might, as you know, Spring Boot and Spring allows you to customize a lot of stuff. Some people have their own constructs on top of Spring Boot and so on. So it's quite hard for the tooling to exactly know all these cases and change all these cases automatically for you. Sometimes there are even decisions need to be made on the path forward to the next version, which the tooling cannot really make for you. So it tries to automate as much as possible, but it cannot automate everything.
Yeah.
But this, as much as possible, is basically trying to get the most tedious work out of your way so that it gets a lot easier for you to update that.
Yeah, we used Open Rewrite here, so if you see something is missing, all the recipes are open source. I think we had other sessions at this conference as well, where you go and find the people working there, so or with them. So, and you can also like create your recipes directly for your company needs and then apply those.
Yeah, that's what's happening under the hood, right? So we haven't built all that ourselves in the tooling. We basically benefit from the open source rewrite project and contribute recipes to that. So it's basically invoking this migration using open rewrite recipes under the hood for this, and it integrates this nicely into the IDE, where I think it makes sense. Say, hey, there's a new version. What do you want to do? Quick fix, please update. Right? Which I think it's what I would like to do. Right?
Do we have time for questions?
I think so. So of course we forgot to really show that at the
Yep.
beginning. Where are my slides? Somewhere. Not around anymore.
Can you go on that one? Yeah.
Okay. Oh. You can see the questions? Yeah, that's awesome.
What about live reload of my web app? So, okay, so you mean like if I do like Quarkus web application development and I use the dev profile, I have my live reload. So when my Java capabilities allow me to do so, I had the experience that it works fine.
Yeah,
what about you?
For Spring, there are basically two options that you have, I think, and they are both available in the IDE as well. One is, of course, you can do these kind of, well, there are actually three things, right? Of course, if you start up stuff in debug mode, you have this hot code replacement. That's just fine. If you use Spring Boot, you can also use the Spring Boot dev tools. They give you kind of a quick restart of the app when you change code or when you change web properties. Are we already too late? Yeah, okay. Oh my God. So we are blocking the keynote here, right? That's why so many people are joining.
Yay!
Nice. Come in.
But maybe most importantly, next question would be graded. Yes, of course. We also have the graded extension. You can just use it. And also with the Spring Initializer, you could have selected graded instead of Maven.
And we are still around.
Yes.
So please feel free to meet us in the hallway for any more questions. And
or like next to the stage until the keynote starts.
Yeah,
right?
or after the keynote.
Yep.
The keynote starts probably right away, right? So thanks for coming. Let's quickly go back to these slides. I think we have this.
Oh yes.
This nice. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks for that.